What's going on, everybody? I'm back. Episode number 190 of the Club and Sub podcast. Tonight's just going to be me. Lags is on a work trip, so he is unavailable to do the show tonight. Doing it an hour early because I got my fantasy football draft at the top of we're at 7:15. So hopefully I'm not too verbose tonight and we can get through this whole thing by then. Yeah, I mean, guys, if you're new here, drop a like, subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Lags would appreciate it. It would help us out a bunch. For a 30% off on your first month subscription to fightnumbers.com, use the promo code CLUB. Again, if you don't know, Fight Numbers, John Kelly's website, he gives his DFS projections on there. They're some of the best in the business. You got bets premium from Ozzy, Pepe, Evan, all really sharp guys. You got Chad on there doing content every week. And perhaps best of all, you got the live odds screen. Gives you live odds on live lines across domestic and foreign books. It's great. There's nothing else like it in the industry. That's worth the ROI in and of itself. Again, promo code CLUB, CLUB. And again, drop a like. And I come in here and I got fucking Dixon in the chat telling me, what did I say about Billy Brand being Twitter mush? Wasn't wrong. I don't really know how that fight would have played out last night, but yeah, I mean, Billy obviously lost. I did get the Finney over. Unfortunately, I was a little smaller on that than the Brand fight. But yeah, Contender is just not the best. Anyway, last week we had UFC 305. It was a good night for me. 4.65 units of profit. I had Rosenstruck minus 170 for 1.7 units. That was pretty easy, although apparently a judge did not think it was that easy and actually thought Ty won dominantly. Worst card I've ever seen in my life. So that was weird. I also had Li Jingliang for a unit and a half at plus 210. Got reverse CLV'd on this, did the smart thing and didn't add. I've gotten burned on that a couple times this year, like badly, just adding when I think the price is way off. Growth, I suppose. I lost that bet, obviously. Leach looked old, and honestly, Prates I thought Prates looked the best I'd ever seen. You know, my big question with Carlos Prates was always just kind of his defense. I felt like it hasn't been a thing he's really displayed at all in the UFC, and I felt he was very counterable, but he did a really good job of managing distance, touching Lee up. I had 2.5 units of Casey O'Neill. Average price, I guess, plus 138, plus 139. That was the best spot, one of the best spots of the card. Obviously, she won every round of that fight fairly comfortably, so that felt good. Had a unit on Jesus Aguilar at plus 200. That went well as well. Hard to know how that goes if it plays out the full way. But, I mean, honestly, anytime you can fade a guy making his debut with under 10 fights, especially against the level of comp that Nickel had fought, against the guy who's above 500 in the UFC, you kind of got to do it at that number unless there's just a giant grappling edge. And then I had 0.21 units on Herbert Burns by sub in round 1. And I had 0.12 units on sub in round 2. I mean, he got 2 takedowns. I mean, if you told me going into that he got 2 takedowns, I probably would have had more money on it than I had on it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it was plus EV. Jenkins fought a really intelligent fight, did a good job not putting himself in danger on bottom. But I think Burns outperformed in the grappling there in terms of getting takedowns. So, yeah, I don't really regret missing it. But, yeah, I mean, good night. It was a good night of fights. Hopefully this week is too. This week's card, UFC Vegas 96, though, it's not the best. I have one bet right now. Couple more I'm thinking about, but I don't know if I'll get there or not. But yeah, with that, we'll jump right in. Again, one more time, guys, drop a like, subscribe. Let's do that thing. All right, first fight of the night. We got Kong Wang taking on Victoria Leonardo. Kong Wang 5-0, Leonardo 9-5. The current price on Kong Wang, she is chucked to the gills at minus 1,200. The comeback on Leonardo plus 800. Going to be pretty brief with this. I mean, look, I think Kong Wang's probably got a bit too much hype coming into the UFC here. Obviously, she's undefeated. Her level of competition in MMA has been quite low. If I'm not mistaken, she either won a kickboxing match or a Muay Thai fight with Valentina Shevchenko, though, and I think won it pretty firmly. And I think that's where a lot of her hype's coming from. Personally, I'm not ready to say she's a fraud or anything like that. You know, she looks like a talented striker, pretty physical, but she is someone who I am probably going to try to fade sooner than later. But with that said, it won't be here. I mean, the truth of the matter is Victoria Leonardo is, I mean, she's one of the worst fighters on the roster, men's or women's. You know, she's got a decent top game if she can get you down. She's pretty physical on top, throws decent ground and pound, okay submission game. But she has no striking at all. She's pretty fragile on the feet. She has very, very poor cardio. And Yeah, I mean that's kind of it. I just kind of think maybe she could get Wang down early here and do well on top. Maybe she could get her down twice and hold her down. I don't really rate that as a very high outcome though. Wang seems to have pretty good hips. She probably hasn't fought anybody quite as good wrestling as Leonardo, but as I mentioned, I don't think Leonardo's wrestling is that good. So it's like not the kind of spot where I'm trying to fade the grappling questions around Wang here. If this is the spot and Leonardo wins, that's fine, but I'm not going to donate here. I think Wang takes care of her, probably finishes her on the back end here. Second fight of the night. We got Josiane Nunes taking on Jacqueline Cavalcanti. I'm kind of frustrated with myself for this one because the current price here, Cavalcanti is minus 200, come back on Nunes plus 170. Honestly, I waited a while to tape this fight, and the line had already moved heavily towards Cavalcanti. And when I went into tape, I was like, oh, man, I can't wait. I think I'm probably going to bet Nunes here. Cavalcanti's only making her second UFC fight. Only win is Zara Farron. Brick Squad holding Lags hostage, saying he won't be released till we get a PFL podcast. I might do one Friday. We'll see. I got both my kids are off school this week. So it's I have both them home while I'm trying to work. So I just haven't had the kind of time I'd like to put in the effort on tape. But yeah, I mean, getting back to my point about Cavalcanti. So it's I wanted to, kind of fade the hype around her, but then I taped it and it's just, I mean, she's just so much better than Josiane Nunes. Nunes, not much of a grappler offensively, very poor grappler defensively. Not something I really expect Cavalcanti to take advantage of. But, you kind of saw it against Zara Farron, who's, very, very slow and plodding. Nunes had a lot of trouble closing distance in that fight. She just really couldn't get inside without kind of sprinting forward, couldn't really cut the cage off well. And Farron had a lot of success. I mean, you could make an argument she won that fight. It went to split decision. And, when I was taping Cavalcanti, my impression is she can play the game Farron plays, but a lot better. She is, I believe, 7 inches taller with 7 inches of reach here, manages distance well, does push a bit of a pace, decently high output, has very good footwork. I mean, those kind of things, I think they're just poison for Nunes. I just don't think she's going to be able to get inside with any kind of consistency here. I think she's probably reliant on, big moments or a knockout to win this fight, which could happen. She hits hard, but I think in the aggregate, Cavalcanti should be able to kind of just outpoint her here relatively cleanly. I think she's a lot better than Farron. We obviously saw that in their last fight. Farron and Nunes basically were even at distance, whereas Cavalcanti outlanded Farron. I believe it was 120 to 36, something like that. So yeah, I expect Cavalcanti to cruise here. I don't really want to lay minus 200 on a women's striker without much power, but I think you can make an argument there's some value at the current price. Next fight, we got Jose Medina taking on Zachary Reese. Current price on Reese, minus 550. Comeback on Medina, plus 400. I don't really have too much wrong with the price here. I think if you wanted to make an argument for Medina, you make a case for betting him live. Because I still have big questions about Zachary Reese, in particular his cardio and his defense. But he is very, very potent offensively. Obviously, he's fought, at this point now, he's fought a couple decent guys and he's won. He's shown he's a capable finisher, which, you obviously want to see. And again, Reese is a guy I'm trying to fade, but, I look at Jose Medina and I just don't see someone there who's really that talented. The guy used to fight at 205 pounds, was pretty out of shape. Seems like he's in better shape these days, but I don't really see anything that he's good at. He seems like a bad grappler to me. Seems like a pretty poor striker to me. I mean, 2 fights ago, this guy was going to a split with a 4-2 Fernando Filo. Pretty bad look, in my opinion. I think Reese should smash him here. I think he should finish. I think his sub could be a decent look here. I think he's got a large grappling edge. But again, with that said, if Medina can clear the first, 6 or 7 minutes or so, maybe look to get in on him live. I just don't really expect him to do that. I think Reese should take care of business and likely finish in round 1 or early in round 2 in this fight. Moving on, we got Vyacheslav Borchev taking on James Lontop. Lontop coming off a very, very disappointing debut where he was submitted in the very first round. Current price here, Borchev, decent favorite. He is minus, where the hell is this price? Borchev is minus 225. The comeback on Lontop, plus 190. Actually, it looks like Lontop's taking some money. He's now minus 211. The comeback on Lontop's plus 181. Honestly, I don't think Borchev should have really any issues here. I think you could make an argument that Slava's chin is not very good, and I wouldn't be inclined to I would agree with you, to be honest. We've obviously seen him get dropped by Chase Hooper in his last fight, and he took a lot of damage in that fight. He got hurt badly against Nazim Sadikov in the fight before. He's been hurt prior to that regionally. You know, the guy can get hurt. There's no question about it. I don't think he's very durable. He looks like a frail old man. And Lontop can hit a little bit. So, like, if Lontop hurts him or finishes him, it wouldn't be the most shocking outcome in the world. But with that said, I think this is a really, really easy matchup for Slava. I think Lontop's best advantage that he has is going to have against most people are output and pace and cardio. And he might have a slight cardio advantage here, but I think he's going to have a hard time capitalizing on it. For one, Slava's a vicious low kicker. For two, he's just a much, much cleaner and much more punishing striker. Three, Slava goes to the body a lot. So this guy's cardio holding up in the manner it has in the past, I think would surprise me a little bit. I mean, yeah, these guys, Slava is just, he's a level above what James Lontop is as a striker. You know, the biggest concern in this fight are Slava's chin, Slava's cardio. And I think they're reasonable concerns, but I have a really, I don't know. I think Slava should win this far more often than not. You know, this is finally a guy who, you know, even if James Lontop wants to come out and wrestle Slava, I'd be a bit surprised if he can control him on the mat. You know, Slava, for being a horrible defensive wrestler, he's not totally clueless. You know, you saw Hooper trying to struggle to get the dominant positions a bit when they fought. You know, he can work up, and like I kind of think that's what will happen if Lontop tries to wrestle here. I don't really think he'll have much of an issue getting up. I think Slava lies about his age? I mean, it's possible, but I don't really feel strongly about it. I mean, the guys from that section of the world, from Eastern Europe, all look like older than what they actually, or all look older than their actual age, in my opinion anyway. But yeah, I think Slava should win this fight. In terms of a bet, I mean, he's minus 211 now. If he got down to like minus 190, I'd honestly probably lay the wood on him. I just don't think Lontop is anywhere near his level. He's way less proven. Obviously, Slava's outstruck some like pretty good fighters, and Lontop, he has outstruck no one really of consequence. So yeah, I think Slava should win. He could get finished. If you want to take a poke on Lontop KO, Lontop 2-3, I understand it, but I think Slava takes care of business here. Next fight, we got Dennis Bazooka taking on Francis, the Fire Marshal. I feel pretty annoyed because I bet Dennis Bazooka for 2 units at plus 200 against Danny Silva. That fight obviously fell apart, which is pretty frustrating. Silva, I felt, was very, very overrated coming into that fight, and I felt Bazooka's been underrated. This is, I think, a more interesting fight in some respects because I think Marshall has got much better jiu-jitsu than Danny Silva does, so maybe he's got more scope to get on top. Obviously, I would say Marshall, what he's best at is just pace and cardio. The guy does push a ferocious pace, and he's got very, very good cardio. What I will say, though, is I still think he's a tremendously flawed fighter, Francis Marshall. You know, the guy has really no defense to speak of at all. Very, very easy to hit on the feet. And what's worse, he wants to bang it out in the pocket a lot. And like, I think he's a knockout waiting to happen, to be frank. I know he got knocked out on the mat in his last fight, but I think he's going to get knocked out on the feet sooner than later. In terms of the grappling, you know, Marshall may push that aspect of his game. And I know Bazooka gave up some grappling to Sean Woodson, but I mean, he fought I think Woodson's kind of tricky just because of his frame, and he's deceptively strong. And Bazooka fought a much better wrestler than Marshall in Kaleo Romero a couple fights back on Contender Series, and he neutralized the grappling pretty well. Obviously, he comes out of a decent gym, Sarah Longo MMA, a lot of good grapplers in that gym. He's close friends with Aljamain Sterling and Merab Dvalishvili. I'd be a little surprised if Marshall could dominate this fight grappling. Maybe he could get a couple takedowns, but I don't think he's the best or most physical wrestler, and I don't know that he'll keep Bazooka down. And if he ends up in the clinch there, I think Bazooka is just a lot better in that position than Marshall is. In terms of the striking, I like Marshall's output a lot more, but Bazooka clearly hits a lot harder. I think he is much sharper, in particular on the counter. You know, I think one of the things that colors people's minds about Bazooka are the fights with, you know, Woodson and Emmers, but like Woodson was on very short notice, and Woodson's a top 15 fighter in the division. And the Emmers fight, I mean, Emmers lamped him right off the bat. Plus, Emmers is a really good fighter, and he's a really explosive athlete. I actually think in doing some deeper tape on Bazooka, he's a decent fighter. He's got pretty good defense. He's pretty good at countering. He's got decent footwork. Like, I don't think Bazooka's coming for the top 15 or anything, but, my opinion on Bazooka entering the UFC was he probably wouldn't hang around long. And I think my opinion on that's changed. I think he's a quality, like, mid-tier UFC fighter. And I think that might be enough here. It's going to be an interesting fight. I haven't bet anything yet. I do understand why the money has come in on Marshall. He's a good bit younger than Bazooka. He's training at ATT now. Obviously, I think the market in general. Where's Luke Lags to see Hansen? Well, Lags will be back on the show next week, I think, or in 2 weeks since there's no card next week. He is in Atlanta, though. He's going to the Braves-Phillies game tonight, so hopefully he enjoys that. But, yeah, I just feel like it's going to be hard for Marshall to separate because I think for Marshall to play his volume game, he's going to have to take some, like, really nasty damage here. Just when Baby said I need Quinn Backer, he's boycotting. What a guy. Yeah, I think he'll have to take some really nasty damage if he decides that he wants to put that volume game off. And I also think Bazooka's leg kicks are pretty legitimate. Yeah, I think it's a competitive fight. I don't think it's dominant on either side. I may get to a bet on Bazooka, especially if it's like keeps widening here. But as of now, I have nothing. Moving on, we got Edmund Shabazian taking on Gerald Meerschaert. Current price, Shabazian minus 280. The comeback on Meerschaert plus 240 here. I don't really feel strongly about this. I do think there are a couple of lines that are at odds here, though. Right now, the over-under is at Pick'em, and the price on Shabazian is minus 280. And I feel like if this is going over more than 50% of the time, Shabazian can't possibly be minus 280. I think – I'm not saying Shabazian can't win a decision. He obviously can. And Meerschaert's not a guy who's going to push the craziest pace or going to just like abuse Edmund striking if he tires. But I do think there's a lot of scope if this fight extends for Edmund tiring and, kind of getting beat up by Meerschaert on the back end or even finished by him. Meerschaert, he's a tough bastard, especially as fights drag out because the guy he throws a lot of, he's obviously a dangerous submission grappler, throws a lot of body kicks. He's a southpaw. He's a kind of tricky to deal with, even though he's not that great technically. But with that said, I think early in this fight, there is a pretty high chance that Edmund's going to knock him out. Edmund, a lot younger. He's still only 26 years old, which feels shocking to me, to be honest. But very fast hands, a lot of power, at a good gym now. He's a much, much better striker than Meerschaert is, and he's just much better defensively. Like, I think he's going to land flush on Meerschaert's chin a fair amount early in this fight, and I don't really think Meerschaert can get him down with any ease early in the fight. So I think there is a good chance Edmund finishes early, but I do think the line is too wide because honestly, like if Edmund doesn't finish him at like a 60% clip or more in the first round and a half here, I feel like there's a pretty good chance that Meerschaert takes over. But all that said, I'll look for Meerschaert live on the back end of this fight. I'm not really interested in all the props that would be interesting are like pretty overpriced. I'm sorry. My son is banging on my office door with a remote. My 1-year-old. Good times. Moving on, though. We got Michael Morales taking on Neil Magny. My boy Rich in the chat here. Michael Morales, I saw, is his mush of the week, which I think is interesting. The current price on Morales is minus 800. The comeback on Magny is plus 550. I don't know, because it's like it wasn't that long ago when Neil Magny won a decision against Jeff Neal, and I don't really think Michael Morales is much, if at all, better than that version of Jeff Neal. But with that said, I do think Neal is a lot worse than he was, when that happened. He's obviously 37 years old now. I shouldn't even say worse because I think his efficacy offensively is about the same. Like, still pumps a high pace, still a good cardio, still a pretty good clinch wrestler. But he does seem to be getting a bit more fragile. I mean, the guy obviously can't deal with calf kicks at all in this point in his career. Honestly, I was pretty interested in the Magny side until I watched Morales' last fight. He actually landed 30 leg kicks in that fight. And that's just kind of enough to spook me with Magny with the leg kicks at this point. Because because just like how many fights do we have to watch Neil Magny's leg get badly injured before we say enough is enough? But yeah, I mean, look, can Magny win this fight? Like, if Morales doesn't go to the leg kicks, I wouldn't be shocked to see Magny outvolume him. I wouldn't be like terribly shocked to see Magny land a couple clinch takedowns or just take over on cardio on the back end here. I just feel like the leg kicks is just such an I-win button against Magny at this point. It's kind of tough to do business with him. Although the price is getting to the point that it's like, maybe you spray it at some point. But I don't know. I don't feel strongly about it. I kind of feel like, Morales should obviously be fine. He's minus 800. If I was going to play anything on Morales, I guess I'd play sub, but I don't even feel strongly about that, to be honest. Moving on, we have got Ryan Loder taking on Robert Valentin. Current price on Loder. He is, Valentin is minus 175. The comeback on Loder is plus 150. Loder is my biggest bet of the card, or is my only bet of the card right now, but I did bet him fairly big. I have 3 units on Loder plus 160. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really familiar with either of these guys. I mean, I knew a bit about Loder's wrestling background. He was it's like 114 and 22 or something like that in Division I wrestling over 4 years, which is pretty wild. I think he was like a 4-time All-American. Very, very, very good wrestler, very good background from it. But I didn't really know much about his MMA game at all. And like looking at the tape here, I'm just like a little alarmed / surprised at the price. I appreciate Robert Valentin. Very, very aggressive. Finishes a lot of fights. Seems like he's very mean. The guy's always hunting a finish. But I feel like his game's kind of formless. And by that, I mean, I don't think he's a particularly technical striker. He hits reasonably hard, but he kind of just wings shots. Like, he's not really setting much up. He's not going to calf kicks, anything like that. He's just kind of coming at you and getting into a brawl. In the grappling, I've seen him try to wrestle in a bunch of fights, but his wrestling offensively doesn't look great. It's mostly clinch takedowns. He's obviously got 6 subs, and he is somewhat crafty with his submissions. I will give him that. But I don't actually think his submission grappling is anything like special at all. Like, I wouldn't say it's not a minus, but it's probably slightly above average. He's just a bit slicker with it than a lot of guys. His grappling in the aggregate, though, is really bad, in my opinion. You watch this guy, I went back and watched this fight with Giatti Mellon, who was former Cage Warriors champion. And that fight was in 2019, so I wasn't sure what to put in it. But Milan absolutely dogged him, got him down easily, was able to mount him in every round of the fight. Even deep in round 3 with Milan dead gassed out, took him down pretty easily, was able to pass him out fairly easily, won a fairly dominant decision. So I'm like, all right. I mean, I'm assuming he's made some improvements since then. So then I went to his fight with the last fight that he lost, which was with Ahmed Salamov, one of these French Russians, in 2022. So 3.5 years later, guy should have made a lot of improvements. No, it was pretty much the exact same deal. Very, very easy to take down, very easy to pass, very easy to mount. He did reverse position a couple times and try to threaten some subs, but like, this is kind of my point about his submission grappling. He's so loose with his subs, and he's so loose in terms of the space he gives guys when he's grappling. I just don't think it's going to translate against like reasonably talented grapplers. And you kind of saw it in that fight. Every time he reversed Salamov, he kind of reversed it back and got on top of him. Fortunately, they got to the Ultimate Fighter, and in his first fight, Valentin landed a step-in elbow that knocked out his opponent within 10 seconds. In his second fight, he got wobbled badly, and then was able to kind of get a straight arm lock from the scarf hold position. It was very weird, to be honest. It was pretty meme. So it's like the guy had 2 fights that lasted a total of like 1 minute and 10 seconds. And I kind of think that's coloring the line, because I just don't really he's a tough guy, like I said, and he's a dangerous finisher, I guess. But I don't think he's got any individual skill that's that great. On the Loder side, I don't think he's a great striker at all, but I think he kind of knows his weaknesses. And by that, I mean, he's not going to be a guy who comes in and steps in with Valentin to brawl here. That's just not going to happen. He's going to try to manage distance. And if Valentin tries to get aggressive, he's going to probably change levels on him. I actually think Loder's got pretty underrated jiu-jitsu. Everybody obviously knows about his wrestling pedigree, but the guy went to a draw in grappling in 2022 with Enrico Coco, who's like a really, really legit black belt. And it's an extremely impressive accomplishment for a guy like Loder. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest edge to the Valentin side in this fight is cardio. And I do think he's got a cardio edge here. And if it turns out Loder gasses out and gets finished in round 3, I won't be blown away at all. Or gasses out halfway through round 2 and ends up losing it on margins like the Bulgarian fight, it wouldn't like blow me away. But I do think Loder has the best skill in this fight by a lot. You know, the guy's a top tier wrestler. I actually think his control is reasonably good. And I think he's going to be able to pass a lot here on Valentin, you know, get from half guard to mount and whatnot. And, you know, even in the fights where Loder's been tired, I've seen him be able to continue to push and like push for takedowns. And so I think he should be able to get them even late in this fight. Yeah, I mean, Valentin's live to finish this cat early, but I think Loder is... I think Loder should be a favorite here. You know, you want to say minus 125, minus 150 because he's inexperienced. Okay, that's fine. I kind of agree with that. Cardio is a question mark. Valentin's a much more proactive finisher. But I do think, you know, Loder, he's got the better skill set. And then, like, you look at this guy's Instagram, man. He's out there. He's been doing this full camp with Fluffy Hernandez and Max Griffin. Like, he's training with those guys every day. I think he's only going to get better. He started MMA really late. But, I mean, the guy's pedigree is excellent. He looks like he's an athlete. Yeah, like Sean Orr just said. We are loading the Loder here. Full send. I'm real quick because Tapology doesn't have listed. I'm just going to do, well, we got Nathan Fletcher against Zigomantas Ramaska. This fight, I guess, just got added. I don't really know anything about either guy. Nathan Fletcher, kind of a bum grappler. That's really all I know. Don't know much about Ramaska, so I don't have much to give you guys there. And then Oulie against Myron Santos. Current price, Santos minus 155. Comeback on Oulie plus 135. I feel people will want to – I'm hoping, actually, that people want to bet the Oulie side because Myron Santos, I think his grappling is clearly his biggest deficiency. We saw him get badly out-grappled by Dan Argueta, and Oulie is a grappler. But I think, number one – I shouldn't even say I think. Myron Santos is a really young kid. I think he's like 23 or 24. He should be improving every single fight. Very, very good athlete, good Muay Thai striker, nasty hands, nasty kicks. Oulie is a grappler, but I don't actually think he's like that good a grappler. You know, like he's done a very good job mugging the guys he's supposed to mug, but I don't think his wrestling is that good. In particular, what bothers me about the Oulie side of this is I just think he lacks physicality. Like, I don't think Santos, like his first level takedown defense didn't look bad against Dan Argueta, but Argueta just kind of out physical him and was able to chain stuff together. I don't think Oulie has those same capabilities in terms of like takedown chaining here. And on the feet, I think Myron Santos is just much, much, much better, and it's not even close. I would really like a narrower number here to bet Santos, especially because even though you obviously have the tail risk of him not having improved his grappling at all, it feels very unlikely to me for a guy of his age and caliber and athleticism that he hasn't improved in the couple of years since the Argueta fight. So, yeah, I lean Santos here. I wouldn't play the minus 155, but I do think he's going to win this fight. Moving on, we have got Tabitha Ricci taking on Angela Hill. Current price, we got Angela Hill minus 113. Come back on Ricci minus 107. I'm going to eventually bet the Ricci side here. I like her a fair amount in this fight. Appreciate it, Mr. Dermo. I like Ricci a fair amount. And Ricci's someone who I've like looked to fade generally in the past. Angela Hill is someone I've bet a ton. Love Angie. She's an absolute dog. I do think the market is kind of forgetting that like grappling has been a weakness for Angela Hill for like a large section of her career, in part because she's obviously had some grappling success in her last two fights against Denise Gomes and Luana Pinheiro. But I mean, when you go back in time, you know, you had Ashley Yoder took her down 2 times, got a fair amount of control in that fight. 3 minutes of control. Ashley Yoder, horrible. You had Tisha Torres take her down. Tisha Torres, not a great offensive wrestler. You had Denise Gomes took her down once. You had Mackenzie Dern, who's a terrible wrestler, take her down 3 times. It's always just kind of been a weakness of hers, you know, and, you know, she's been able to use her wrestling for her own benefit in recent fights, but now she's actually taking on someone who I think is going to try to wrestle back at her here, and I think Ricci's going to have a lot of success with it, to be honest. I actually thought, you know, Ricci's someone who's wrestling I've never totally rated, but I actually thought it looked significantly improved in her last fight against Tisha Torres. She didn't get her down, but she was using she was chaining takedowns in a way that I've never really seen her do it before. She was using like weight shifts, which I've never really seen her do before either. And I think a lot of those attempts get Hill down here, to be honest. And I actually think she's got some scope to control Hill on the mat. In the striking, you'd favor Hill, right? Because obviously, that's her base. She's a Muay Thai striker. And Ricci, it's probably her biggest deficiency. And I do favor Hill in the striking, but I think Ricci's a lot faster than she is. Ricci has a tendency to throw in combination too, which even if she's not landing, tends to look good for the judges. I mean, we literally saw her win a split decision against Tecia Torres last fight, and we saw her get a split decision with Lupe Godinez in a fight where Lupe clearly outlanded her and landed the harder shots, but the judges kind of got hypnotized by it. The judges very clearly like her game. So I think she can compete there, especially because she does have a huge speed advantage here. And then ultimately just thinking about it from a macro standpoint, look, we saw Tecia Torres take on Angela Hill a couple years ago and beat her pretty thoroughly. And Ricci, irrespective of what you think of the decision in Torres-Ricci, Ricci gave herself a real shot in that fight. She fought her very, very competitively, much more so than Angela Hill did, which seems bullish for her. And then even zooming out even further, it's like, man, Angela Hill, I know, she's still fighting well, almost 40 years old, but guys, she's almost 40 years old here. She's taking on a fighter in Tabitha Ricci, who is 10 years younger than her, who is going to implement a game plan that has traditionally given her issues in the past, and who historically judges have liked her style and judges haven't liked Angela Hill's style. I just feel like Hill's upside here is a competitive decision. I think there's a lot more finishing upside on the Ricci side of things, a lot more. I think there's a lot more dominant decision upside on the Ricci side of things. I just think you got to make Ricci in the minus 140, minus 150 range here. I'll eventually play her. And then we got the main event. Caio Borralho taking on Jared Cannonier. Current price, Borralho minus 240. Comeback on Cannonier plus 205. I bet Imavov in Cannonier's last fight, right at post. And I think it was a pretty good bet. He was turning the tide. He turned the tide pretty hard on the back end of the fight. I do think that fight is likely coloring this quite a bit. I've heard some stuff about Cannonier's last camp. He had an allergic reaction a week out from his fight. His wife had a miscarriage 2 weeks before the fight. Just had a bad camp and a lot of shit go wrong. And honestly, though, in spite of all that, I actually thought on rewatch, Cannonier looked pretty good in the fight. I think Imavov might have been able to have janked the decision anyway if he didn't finish him. But, Cannonier fought. He struck better against Imavov than anybody has previously. And I think Imavov's striking is very, very good. And so I am very, very skeptical that Caio is going to outstrike Jared. In particular, because I feel like Borralho, the guys who have really taken it to him have had success. You go and watch, the Abbas Magomedov fight. He wasn't exactly running away with margins in that fight until Abbas gassed. Fight before that, Mikhail Osejek. Mikhail was honestly beating Caio's ass on the feet in that fight, badly. And I think Jared's a much better striker than either of those guys. He's faster, hits harder, better at pressuring, better jab. And apologies if you can hear my son crying in the background. That's what 1-year-olds do. But yeah, I would be a little surprised if Caio won the striking here. Where I do think Caio can have a lot of success, however, is in the grappling. I do think he can get takedowns here, and I think back takes could be available. Jared does tend to give his back up. Caio is very, very good at taking the back. The one thing I will give him credit for, though, is he does do a very, very strong job of fighting hooks. Jack Hermanson got his back, denied the hook on it. David Branch, who's a serious, serious black belt, took him down 3 times and was able to kind of get to the back, but he couldn't get hooks in on him. Jared, he's a very educated grappler, honestly. So, I do think, obviously, given that he will give his back up, Caio getting back takes and or rear naked choke is obviously in play. But I think Caio is going to very likely have a hard time getting to that position, just given what we've seen from Jared. But he can, and I think Caio can win rounds grappling, especially early. The big question at the end of the day here, I think, is going to be, was Jared slowing down against Imavov a product of him overpacing himself in that fight, which I kind of think it was? Or is it a product if he's 40 and his cardio is not what it used to be? It could be that too. I don't think Caio has the best cardio, though. We've seen this guy slow down a lot. And so, I kind of think Jared's got to be the side here. He's obviously more experienced. He's fought much better competition than Caio has. He's got much better wins than Caio has. I think he's going to have a lot of striking here. My biggest concern with the fight is kind of just is that it's a pretty quick turnaround for Jared. Obviously, Imavov hits hard, but, Caio is not a light hitter either. And he probably has a pretty big speed edge early in this fight. But I do think, maybe there's some credence for waiting to bet Jared live here. I think you could make that argument as well. But I do ultimately just think, though, that Jared is getting kind of underpriced due to his last performance. And obviously, Caio's undefeated in the UFC. And I think that's probably leading to him being overpriced. So, yeah, I might bet Jared. I'll probably wait till fight day because it seems like it's all Caio money. I mean, it's up to minus 240. I could see this closing at minus 300. But I'll probably end up shaking Jared here. I do think he's probably the side. I'm not sure if I'll have a PFL show or not this week. I may. It really depends if I can get around tape or not. Like I mentioned, I got both my kids home with me this week, so it's been really a pain in the ass getting tape done. I did bet Enrique Barzola in PFL at about minus 105. I think he's good up to about minus 160, though, personally. And, yeah, guys, please, if you like the show, drop a like, subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Lags would appreciate it. We will be back in 2 weeks. I don't believe we have a card next weekend because it's Labor Day weekend. And we will be back covering Burns and Brady, which is an interesting card. Again, guys, for 30% off on your first monthly subscription to Fight Numbers, use the promo code CLUB. Check it out. It's a great site. It is a great site. It is more than worth your recommendation. Tristan's asking, what did I think of Rizan Kuniev? He's fine. He's a good wrestler. I've seen him wrestle a lot in PFL. So, I mean, he'll win plenty of UFC fights. I don't think there's any danger if he's coming for the title, but he's a good fighter. I didn't really have a strong opinion on that fight in particular last night. I would say of that card, it's ironic because Finney didn't get a contract, but his style, being a volume wrestler at 185 pounds, is probably the most meta style of anybody on there. Like, I think he probably would have the most immediate upside. But yeah, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. Hope you all enjoy your night. I'm going to go do my fantasy football draft. Take it easy. Peace.